Hello, Maeya TV. Welcome back. We have a full day of interviews coming up. First, we're here with Robert Tobin. He's a screenwriter, and we're excited to have him here to talk to us about the craft of screenwriting. Robert?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So, you've done a lot of screenwriting on your own. You've also written a lot about screenwriting.
Yes.
So start by telling us about how you approach craft screenwriting.
Well, because of my background, which was originally in the film industry, at least, it was in development. And so that meant that I read scripts and novels that were submitted to the producers I worked for and tried to find ones that might be amenable to being adapted for the big screen or for television. And because of that, I became aware of because every project that was sent to me, I had to read and then analyze and then tell my producer why this might or might not be a good project to do. That really means that you have to understand what makes a project good. So it was a real on-the-ground, hands-on, hit the ground running kind of education that over the years, and I did thousands upon thousands of these analyses of these books and screenplays. And in fact, after about 5,000, I think I only ever recommended 34. And all 34 got done, but those are the kind of odds that you're looking at when you submit to the industry, because these projects that were submitted to us, I was working for fairly big producers, so they had already been through the agencies. So they weren't just like, really, amateur level projects that got sent directly to us. They got through the agencies picked the ones that they thought might have some type of, prospect of being made into, produced as a movie. And then they got sent to us. So among all of those really good projects, I picked 34 out of 5,000 and everyone got made. That shows you the importance of structure. And the one thing that I saw then and later when I was a vice president of Writers Boot Camp, one of the big screenwriting schools here in America, is I saw that every mistake in a script that I read originated from a flaw in the structure of the story. So it was never that there was the structure was fine and there'd be some dialogue mistake or some characterization or thematic mistake that stood on its own. Every one of those mistakes arose from some crack in the foundation of the story, and the foundation, of course, is the structure. And so whenever I approach screenwriting, and I work quite frequently as a script doctor and a script analyst and a script consultant around the world, from China to Ireland and France, Canada, India, Dubai, all over the place, I'm always first looking at the structure of the story, whether I'm writing a story from a concept and I have to create that structure, or whether I'm given a script to do a rewrite or a polish on, I immediately look at the structure and analyze it and make notes based on the structure, because I can always find what's wrong and what's right in that structure. And then from there, so it's like when you grow a tree. If you don't even have a tree there, you're not going to be looking at the leaves. You're going to be looking, okay, the seed goes into the soil is the structure, it has to have the right nutrients, and from there, the tree, the trunk, the twigs, the leaves, the branches, the flowers, all of that emerges from the soil. And usually when you have a problem with a plant like that, is you look, to enrich the soil. You don't like put something onto a leaf. You go, the leaf is hurting, that's because of what's happening at the level of the soil or the level of the structure of a screenplay.
So you looked at so many scripts through your time as a reader. Out of thousands, only a handful get made. What did those scripts do that elevated them above all the others?
Well, again, if they're structurally fine, which means, and structure is a general term, but I know in my own books, and I've written a couple of screenwriting books that have done well, luckily, and kind of got me to a position where some people in the industry know who I am, and my books get quoted and get referred to as, there's certain elements, number of elements to a well-written screenplay, and that you've got, you've got your jeopardy, you've got your opponent, you've got your enabling circumstances, you've got, which are the circumstances at the beginning of a script. And when all of those elements are met, then you know that structurally the story's going to work. Then you start to look at things like, how is the dialogue? How is the characterization? And again, the connection between the elements is very important, because when you look at characterization and dialogue, for instance, if you have a flaw, if a dialogue seems flat or weak or doesn't seem well suited to the person speaking the dialogue, you go immediately to the next level, which is the deeper level, which is characterization. If you do not know who your character really is, if you haven't created a story for that character, a backstory for that character, if you don't know who that character, what religion, what upbringing, what nationality, what ethnicity, what region of the country were they brought up by two parents, one parent, were their parents straight, were they gay, what religion were the parents, you go to immense detail to create those characters believably, because when that character says something or even walks into a scene, you need to know how they're going to react and what they're going to say. An example would be if you have a character walk into a room and it's a bar, for instance, and there's a lot of, they're telling dirty jokes and drinking and everything's kind of wild and loose, and they're not being politically correct in any sense of the word, because they're drunk and they're maybe working class and they're relaxing, and there's no desire or need to be politically correct. If that person walks into that room and they're that kind of person, they're not going to be thrown by a dirty joke. But if that person is a person who's very sensitive because in their past they've been sexually harassed or abused, or there's something in their past that makes them very sensitive to sexual innuendo, they walk into that room and the reactions are going to be completely different. Their dialogue's going to be completely different. So whereas the first character might say, that's a great joke, I got another one, have you heard the one about? The second character, who's far more sensitive based on their background and who they are as a person, might just kind of duck their head or immediately leave the scene. So characterization leads to dialogue, and structure leads to characterization. So you can see that not only do you have all of these elements of structure, but they have to be in the proper relationship to each other in order to work. You think of somebody like Rocky's character, Rocky Stallone's character, Rocky, in his film, if he was brought up in a family that was very supportive of who he was, it would be a completely different story, because Rocky's whole psychology was based on the fact that he was told he was ugly, and he better be he's ugly and too stupid to do anything else in his life. That's what drove him to be a fighter. Can you imagine if that same character was well educated, brought up in Bel Air or Malibu, his parents were, sent him to the finest schools, that story wouldn't work. So you really have to understand that there's structure, there's characterization, there's dialogue, and you really have to make sure that all of the elements are in correct relationship to each other. And that's what those 34 scripts had. And even before analyzing them, I remember every one of those scripts that when I sat down, I was entranced by it. And I actually had to remind myself to analyze the script and not just read it, because the scripts were that good. And that's what the difference was between the 34 and the 5,000 that didn't make it.
Now, what are the top problems that beginning writers have with structure?
Well, to be honest, the first thing is most writers don't know that there is structure, and they don't understand the structure. So they want to get to the story, and I think getting to the story quickly, because they have an idea of what they want and where they want to go, and so they just start. And some writers all have such an innate understanding of structure that they can sit down and write a story, and you're going, God, they didn't even prep for it. I guess you don't need to prep for it. No, they did prep for it with their life and their talent and their skills. So it's so internalized that they can sit down and go, I want to write a story about two women in Detroit, Michigan, who want to be mechanics, and they're fighting the tide of only men can be mechanics. And you go, okay, and they sit down and they write it, and you go, that's brilliant. They didn't even have to write the structure. They didn't have to, really research character or anything. It's because they have it innately. But for most people, if they just sit down and go, I don't want to have to spend a week or 2 weeks creating a structure, finding out who the opponent is, finding out what the character's flaw is, finding out what event is the cause that the main character to have to confront their flaw and try to overcome it. I don't have to just want to decide whether it's a tragedy in which they don't overcome their flaw or whether it's a happy ending in which they do overcome their flaw, and they don't want to get into the details and the weeds of it. But for most people who aren't naturally brilliant, intrinsically understand structure, and they're just brilliant writers, for most of us, we have to really, if we want to be successful, we have to understand what it is we're trying to say and how to say it in the best way, given what we want to say and who trying to say it, our characters.
So you have several books out that go into detail
Yes.
with how to write a screenplay.
Yes. My most recent one, the one that you can still get and that I'm actually rewriting, and I'll get into that in a second, is called The Screenwriting Formula. The Screenwriting Formula by Rob Tobin. You can go on to Amazon or wherever it is that you like to get your books, and you can order it there. And the revision that I'm doing now based on my agent's suggestion is I'm bringing it up to date because the book is probably about 10, 15 years old. And there are a lot of realities in today's film and television and streaming industry that didn't exist when I came up and didn't exist even 10, 15 years ago when I wrote this book. And one of the big things is I'm having a whole huge section on AI, and not just how to use AI, but when you should use it and when you shouldn't, how reliable it is or isn't, the pitfalls of using it. I've been using AI so intensively in the last little bit, partly as for research for my rewrite for the screenwriting formula, and it's like talking to an idiot savant in a way when you talk to AI, because you can say find every producer who is looking for a baseball script that has kids as the main characters, and it's amazing. It'll go out there and find you 15, 20 producers who are currently looking for those kind of scripts. And that's the kind of help you do want to have from AI, because they can do the grunt work. They can act as your producer's assistant almost in a way, that kind of role. But then on the other hand, you'll ask it something and it'll give you somebody else's movies, or it'll give you something from a time period 10 years ago, because chronologically it has such a huge, massive database. If it misses its target by a fraction of an inch, it'll give you something that's completely unrelated to what, and if you don't understand that it's unrelated, you could send out a query based on, like for instance, if you're querying a producer and you ask AI, well, that producer has produced, I know they produced some baseball movies for my little kids baseball movie that I'm script that I'm pitching. Give me the names of those scripts, those movies. Well, they can give you the name of non-baseball scripts from a different producer altogether, and you put that into your query letter and send it off, and the producer's looking at you like, I know what kind of amateur this is that's submitting to us, but I'm never going to take anything from them. And that's another thing that's very important for every writer to know in the industry, is you never ever submit anything that isn't perfect, or at least as perfect as you can make it. Because having been a development exec, I know that every production company keeps track of every submission made to it. And if a submission is made that is really bad, really amateurish, they're going to mark that down, and they will not accept any other scripts from that writer. Because if another script comes in from that writer, they'll look at the database and they'll go, Frankie Fellows over here just wrote that incredible. We're not going to look at anything from Frankie anymore. So it goes into the circular file system, the trash can. So there's all sorts of things. If there's one general thing I would have to say to writers is know your craft. People think that being a screenwriter is just like anybody can be a screenwriter. You don't have to go to school for it. You don't have to have a license or degree for it. and you don't have to have permission, you don't have to meet any standards, legal or government standards, like building a house, you have to meet standards, you don't have to do that as a writer. So if anybody can do it, I'll do it. And of course, that what that can do is ruin your career right off the bat, because maybe that's what your attitude is at the beginning, but then eventually you learn and you accept that you have to know your craft, and so you study your craft and you get to a position where you're writing good scripts. You've already blown your career because you've submitted bad scripts. So be patient. On average in Hollywood, a produced screenwriter has written 10 to 20 screenplays before they get produced. That's the dues that you have to pay as a screenwriter. Nobody wants to hear that, but it can save your career if you know that and you have patience. So you write, you rewrite, and you rewrite, and you rewrite until you can't change another single word in your script. And then you don't submit it to the industry. You submit it to a screenwriting competition. And you submit it to maybe 5 of the top screenwriting competitions. Yeah, it'll cost you $50, $70, per competition. But, you either want to be a screenwriter or you don't. If you're not willing to spend $50, then why would a producer want to spend 3 hours to read your script? You have to be fair about it and understand that there's a commitment of time and money that is involved in it. You would never say, I'm going to build a bridge and then just go off and build it. You would study, you would get degrees, you would get legal licenses and so forth. The same thing should apply to screenwriting.
Now, you've helped beginning writers in the Writers Bootcamp that you're part of. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, boot camp was, I actually wrote my first book, actually I guess it was my second book, the Screenwriting Formula, after having served as VP at Writers Boot Camp, and my particular job was dealing with the graduates of the course. Because like with most screenwriting courses, most people who take those screenwriting courses are beginners. And because they're beginners, they have a lot of limitations. And most of those screenwriting courses last maybe 8 weeks at the most. And I've given those kind of courses. I've given everything from weekend courses to 8-week-long courses. But I always make the students understand that this is just an introduction, and it's not sufficient to really be able to write a screenplay correctly, or at least at the level that it will be accepted. So most of the scripts I read from very limited, and they were trying to cram in 8 weeks of knowledge into a script that they were writing as they were taking the course. So even if they learn something on the 8th week, it's not going to be in the script because they've already written most of the script. So whatever mistakes have been made in there. But sometimes reading nothing but flawed scripts is a real education, because if you read the really good, sometimes you can't even understand why it's good, because a really brilliant writer, you look at a Goldman, a Brooks, and you read their scripts and you're just dazzled by it. And it really takes a lot of education and experience to be able to understand why that scene worked. Why the line, you make me want to be a better man is one of the greatest lines ever written in film. Why? Because of who he said it to and the circumstances and his own disease, mental disease, that made him such a jerk. And for him to sit there and he resisted becoming a better man so much in his life, that when he sat down with this one woman and said to her, "You make me want to be a better man," oh my God, we all cried. We all went, that's the most dramatic thing that particular character could say. But reading a script like that may not tell you how to write a script well, because it's at such a high level. So reading a lot of flawed scripts really helped me in a lot of ways, because I went, okay, that's where that went wrong. And then when you're reading hundreds upon hundreds of scripts, you're going, God, all of those scripts have this one particular issue. And then you track it down to again, and that's where I really learned structure.
Now, you don't just talk about screenwriting, you do it your own too. You're a working screenwriter.
I am.
Can you tell us about some of the things that you've worked on?
Sure. I've written on two types of scripts. The type spec scripts, and a spec script, for those who may not know, is a script that you write on your own. You're not hired to write it. You're not paid to write it. You write it because it's a passion project for some reason. You want to write a rom-com or a drama or whatever, a western, whatever. It's a script that a story you really want to tell, and you write it and you perfect it and you send it out to the industry, hoping that it'll get produced. And by the way, very few spec scripts ever get produced. If there's 150 movies made in a year, maybe 3 or 4 of them might be spec scripts, depending on the year. Some years are better than others. So that's spec scripts, and I've written my own spec scripts and been lucky enough to have some of them produced. A few years ago, I had one called Get Married or Die that was on the streaming services for quite a while and did quite well. And my most recent one was based on a script of mine called Love on the Adriatic, and it was set in a small town on the Italian Adriatic, and it was a love story with kind of a twist. It was a love drama more than a rom-com. It wasn't a rom-com. And it got produced in Italy, shot in Italy just about a year or two ago. And after all the post-production and everything, it's now being shot in Europe. So, and then I've worked on movies like, there's a movie I worked on called Dam 999, which is a Chinese, an Indian project that I worked on about a dam that bursts in India, and it's a real drama. And I got to work on that. And that was interesting because I've worked on Chinese scripts and Indian scripts and scripts from Dubai and Ireland, and every culture has their own limitations and requirements and taboos and desires. If you write an Indian script, you're probably going to be writing a dancing scene, which is interesting because the script I worked on was a drama, involved the loss of life in the thousands and tens of thousands of people when the dam finally bursts. But somewhere in there's a dancing scene. It was required. And then in China, it was like you couldn't do anything religious, you couldn't do anything political. You had to be, and even beyond that, there was just, they had a different way of telling a story in China. And it's not better or worse, it's just different. And it's like the Western way of telling a story isn't better or worse either. It's just very different. So you have to accommodate. But even within the West, I remember writing a script for an Irish producer, and in that, Ireland has its not very gay friendly, for instance. It has you can't really be pro-English in an Irish script. So even in a fellow Western country, when you write a script for a different culture, the Irish culture is different than the French culture, than the Dubai culture, than the China culture. So it's been very interesting working both on spec scripts, which you get paid nothing for, and working on assignment, which sometimes you get paid very, very well for.
So you have one script that you're pitching right now. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I'm very excited about this script. It's called The Good Americans. And I pitch it by saying it's basically Hamilton meets Rent meets Donald Trump. If you may want to turn your TV off now if you don't want to hear political stuff, but it is a political script because today everything is political. You can't go to the store without worrying that, you know, there might be an ICE agent around the corner. I'm lucky as an old white guy that I have a lot of advantages that a lot of people, but most of my friends are either Asian or Hispanic, Indian, Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and even my doctor, who's a Middle Eastern, has told me that he has to watch himself and be aware of whether there's ICE agents around. That kind of political climate does not allow you to write an honest script that does not address politics. And that's what it's a rap musical called The Good Americans. And I'm really reaching out to everybody in the industry right now, because most people really like this script and they've told me they like it. It's done well in contests. It's won contests. It's in a major contest right now. It's made the 3rd round of a major contest right now. It's getting a lot of good feedback, but everybody's afraid to produce it. Because when you look around and you realize that Ellison, who's a friend of Trump's, now owns half the industry, and that the other half of the industry is scared into compliance because of Trump, you realize that, wow, being in America right now is a different thing than it's ever been. And you have to, so that's what this script is about. It takes place on January 6th, 2021. And if you don't know what significance that date has, I urge you, I'm not going to tell you, I want you to look it up because you should know what January 6th, 2021 means in America and really to the world.
So if anyone out there is interested in this, where can they find you?
If you can contact me for that script, to help you with a script if you're looking for a script consultant or a script doctor. My email is script90@gmail.com. That's scripts like movie scripts, plural, 90@gmail.com. So scripts90, and it's Rob Tobin. And I'd be happy, even if you just want to contact me and ask some questions about screenwriting. I'm always very interested in helping new screenwriters and veteran screenwriters. And if you're in the industry and you're looking to have somebody analyze a script or rewrite or polish or do an adaptation, I've done it all. And I love story, I love the passion of story, and I love the power of story. And right now, in this our political climate, the power of story may be the only thing that can save us. So.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for coming here and sharing so much about screenwriting. Everyone, please look into him if you're a writer who want to improve, or if you're a producer who wants a writer. Everyone, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned because we have more interviews coming up.